Finished off by the Dorsetshire. Good, well done, the Royal Navy. But I have given the background to the hood. It looks as though Hood was blown up by an IED, and it looks as though that was fired by a radio signal from the Bismarck. We know the German admiral knew that Hood was about to blow up before she blew up. Why? Because the German admiral, Lutyens, orders Prince Eugen to transfer her fire from HMS Hood to Prince of Wales before the Hood is sunk. Well, that's nonsense. Why on earth would you order your other ship in your squadron to transfer fire from the main opponent with the bigger and heavier guns, who was first in the British line, and switch to the Prince of Wales, which wasn't fully in commission, as the Germans knew, because they had assets in the Admiralty. Hood and Prince of Wales had been sent out in order to get both sunk. And that's because Pound was being pressured by the Germans. I'm not sure what they had on him, but they had something on him, and he was working with the Germans, and he's working with the Cabinet Secretary Bridges. And remember, we had Hess flying from Germany. The whole Hess coup thing is linked into the destruction of Hood. The intent was to embarrass Churchill, force Churchill out, and replace him with Halifax in a coup that was backed by Canaris and Bridges, the Cabinet Secretary, who was working for the Germans. You can see now why the Cabinet Office wanted to raid high flattened seas and copy Spyhunter.
Wasn't Hood captained by Mountbatten?
No, Mountbatten was a German spy. Mountbatten was put in charge of an aircraft carrier until they spotted that he was a German spy, and somebody realised they better find a non-job for Mountbatten in a hurry, because otherwise he'd probably get the ship sunk. That is why Mountbatten was relieved of command of HMS Illustrious. And his relief of HMS Illustrious, relief of command, came only a few weeks after HMS Indomitable, which was supposed to be the carrier for Force Z. We always allocated a carrier to Force Z. She was HMS Indom, the Indom was in Kingston, and the captain of Indom was ordered to run her aground. He left the channel, which is something you never do. Everybody knows Kingston Harbour's shallow. The last thing you do in a 24,000-ton aircraft carrier is leave the channel, but he left the channel. Why? Because he'd been told to, he'd been given instructions to, because the idea was to get Prince of Wales and Repulse sunk. Prince of Wales and Repulse were betrayed. I've named the German spy. It was Rear Admiral Palliser, who was recruited by Admiral Sinclair, and another German spy called Drax. Ian Fleming gave the name Drax to his German villain in Moonraker. Ian Fleming was quietly tipping the wink on Drax, who was in fact a German spy, and it all goes back to Mountbatten's father, who was working for the Jerrys. Mountbatten's father had recruited Sinclair and Drax many decades before. So Prince of Wales and Repulse were betrayed by a signal from Singapore, which lured the Prince of Wales and Repulse to a false landing at Kuantan on the Eastbourne coast. The Japanese knew exactly where to find the ships because they were radioed from Singapore. Now, another piece of evidence that Lutyens on Bismarck knew that Hood was about to sink. If you look at the photographs of the action, and I point this out to Captain Peter Hall, who's a friend of mine, who read a very good book on battleships. Not a friend of mine, but we know each other. And I should be pointing this out to Peter when next I see him. He's got a picture of Bismarck in the action with Hood in his book, Battleships. Anton turret, the Germans don't do it properly. The Royal Navy have proper names for turrets, A, B, X, Y. The Jerrys always give them names, Anton, Bruno, Caesar, Dora. Anton turret, which is A turret, is trained fore and aft in the middle of the action. Bismarck wasn't even firing her main armament. She had a quarter of her main armament trained fore and aft. She wasn't bothering, because she knew the Hood was about to disappear in smoke, and she did. There is no explanation whatsoever for Bismarck not engaging Hood with all of her main armament, but she doesn't. And yet naval historians have just printed these photographs, like Peter, who's a nice chap, and they print these photos, and they don't stop and think like Jack the Ripper. You know, how do you disembowel somebody without them being tied up whilst they're still alive? Nobody thinks about it. Why? You know, you print photos of a battleship engaging the most powerful, well, most famous warship in the Royal Navy, and her guns are trained, one of her gun turrets is trained forward, it's not even firing, but the gun turret is fully operational. And we know this because we know the damage reports on Bismarck. Bismarck hadn't yet been damaged. And yet the turret sticking out fore and aft, it's not even firing. Because the captain of Bismarck and the admiral knew full well that it was the whole thing was a set-up, it wasn't a proper battle, and their main opponent was about to explode, and probably by radio signal from the Bismarck. So that's the Hood. The Comet airliners, and you've done very well to bring me out of my shell. I'm winding up because I know something. I may have said something controversial. I hope not, but one of you may have.
It's 8 o'clock exactly.
Exactly. Final quick comment. The comets, Comet airliners. Comets crashed because they had square windows. They didn't have square windows. Very frustrating. They had square windows with round edges, and yet Channel 4 will knock out documentaries spouting nonsense about square windows, and you actually see in the background a picture of the Comet with the square windows, but with the edges rounded. The edges on the windows on the Comet were rounded. De Havilland had tested them to £100 per square inch. They were only pulling at maximum £8 per square inch at altitude, and the Comets both went down at 26,000 feet. The pressure was only about £5 per square inch. There is no way they could have been brought down by metal fatigue. 2 comets fall out of the sky about the same time after takeoff from the same airport at the same altitude, and people don't ask themselves, how could that have happened? Well, I can tell you how it happened. I've even named the German spy. It was a man called Herzog. He put 2 IEDs on each aircraft in the lower fuselage cargo hold, and it ought really to have been obvious that it was a bomb. Bombs, apart from anything else, the French had comets, but the French comets didn't suffer from metal fatigue. Well, how is it that only British comets could suffer from metal fatigue? It's just nonsense. Metal fatigue affects all aeroplanes, whether French or British. The only bit of the entire comet wreckage, only one bit, the ADF panel, had any signs of metal fatigue. And when you look at it and check the chain of evidence, it's one thing we lawyers do, check the chain of evidence, that bit wasn't retrieved from the Mediterranean by the Royal Navy. It was handed to us by the Italians. And I've made a point, nobody's even checked the part number to see if it came off a British comet. I think it came off a French comet. The reason I think that is because I put it to the Royal the biddies who were trained at the Royal Aeronautical Society.
Farnborough.
And I said, sorry?
Farnborough.
No, it wasn't Farnborough, it was down in London. And I wrote off to whoever was looking after the bid, and I said, right, tell me the part number. No response. Aha, thank you. I suspect the part number on that panel is actually for the French Comet 1A. The French Comets had a different designation. They were called the 1A because they had they had 4 extra seats and slightly less range because they were being used on a slightly different route. But the French and the UAE, Air France all had comets. They didn't suffer from metal fatigue. Not a single comet, not one of the entire comet fleet had any sign of metal fatigue. And we know from the Farnborough tests that their test comet actually blew up not at the windows, their test comet blew up at the windows, but we know that Comet Yoke-Peter, the first comet that went down, did not actually commence her breakup sequence at the windows. All absolute nonsense. And I've exposed for the first time in Spyhunter that Farnborough lied to Lord Cohen's inquiry about the number of hours the Comet airframe had spent in the test tank. And I did it through the simple mechanism of taking Farnborough's own calculations as to how many equivalent hours in the test tank were equivalent to hours in the air, and then I noted the time when it went into the test tank and the time when it fractured. And there is no way that you can reach the figure given by Farnborough, which is 9,000 hours. Absolute nonsense. It's closer to 26,000. In short, this plane was so strong that Farnborough had it in the test tank. They were waiting. It took them weeks to get the plane to fracture. And I have pointed out that when the thing fractured, it was at an overpressure. They not only had the thing in the test tank for thousands of hours beyond the point where they say the thing disintegrated, but they had it at a much higher pressure because they couldn't fracture the plane with the pressure that was normally experienced in flight. And I said that there is in fact a piece of evidence about this, because everybody says, where's your evidence? In a famous piece of newsreel about the Comet and the test, we see in the corner, somebody, I always miss the details, somebody missed right in the bottom left-hand corner of this old newsreel footage, you can see the gauge. And we know the pressure that was in the test tank, and the gauge was reading, I think it was 15 pounds per square inch, whereas the plane was only designed for pressures of 8, and was designed to cruise at 36,000 feet with 8 pounds per square inch. Maximum pressure was, I think, 10.5 pounds per square inch at 40,000 feet. No way did the Comets fail because of metal fatigue. And that's all blown in Spyhunter. Well, there we are. For those of you interested in the EU, you'll, I'm sure, be interested in my revelations on the 1975 referendum. The good guys won, okay? The No campaign won the 1975 referendum. The figures were rigged in Whitehall by a German spy called Philip Allen, who drafted the European Convention on Human Rights. So I've named the German spy who rigged the 1975 referendum. If you recall, there wasn't a constituency count. The count was done centrally. The reason the Home Office set up the central counting was to allow them to rig the numbers. There wasn't a declaration in any constituency. Each constituency phoned in the numbers, and all they had to do was to rig the all they had to do was to rig the count. They didn't actually have to stuff ballot papers. They didn't have to lose ballot papers. It was a con. The No campaign won in 1975.
What was the name of the person?
Philip Allen.
Allen.
Yes, he was given a peerage as a reward, Lord Allen of Annydale. He was working in the Cabinet Office in World War II. He was microfilming the War Cabinet minutes. He was working in the War Cabinet in World War II. And I've said, in fairness to Philip Allen, he's one of the best microfilmers of War Cabinet records that Jerry's ever had. He was particularly neat. And you can always tell in the German archives, apparently, you can always tell the photographs that Allen takes because he takes care to line everything up straight. Some spies get into a panic and they get nervous, and they're taking photographs of War Cabinet minutes, and they're all, you know, there's always one paragraph missing. Philip Allen, a very cool spy, he was always very careful when he photographed the War Cabinet minutes that everything was nice and neat and straight. The Jerrys have in the archives in Dachau an entire set of British War Cabinet minutes from World War II. And they were getting him in World War II. And they were being photographed by Philip Allen, the man who rigged the 75 referendum, scumbag. No longer with us. Final point, congratulations to UKIP. I think a number of members of UKIP are here today. Well done from a Tory to UKIP on your outstanding result. Before you even ask, how do we get out of this mess? Well, one of the things we want to do is get out of the European Union. It's absolutely straightforward. Some of you will have seen my proposals. A number of Tory MPs have now called for a UKIP-Tory deal. The time has now come for our two great parties to work together on a common platform of withdrawal from the European Union. That will require a new Tory leader. That can soon be arranged. And we are in the process of dumping Cameron. It is proposed to dump Osborne as well. And I think the sort of deal that UKIP will be offered is around 50 safe or winnable seats, 5 minimum cabinet seats, and a common policy platform to include immediate withdrawal from the European Union on 12 months' notice under the Vienna Convention on the Law of Treaties, immediate repeal of the European Communities Act. So,
who would replace Cameron and Osborne?
That I won't give away because he's a member of the Cabinet, but he's a sound Eurosceptic member of the Cabinet. But that's one bit of information that is going to Nigel Farage, but is not going to anybody else at the moment. But no, we have lined up somebody sensible. Why am I so confident that we can get rid of Cameron? Well, I'm an intelligence specialist. I'm the suit in the party that's got I've got the gen on Cameron, okay? We've got the goods on Cameron. It shouldn't be too difficult to offload him. And I believe it may be possible to go briefly into Chatham House rules without a video.
He's not a German spy, is he, Cameron?
No. He's not actually a German spy. There is a German spy in the Cabinet Office, but it's not Cameron. It's a German spy in the Cabinet Office who... I'm now moving to territory which is for Chatham House rules only, and not for videoing. But that is the way forward. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen.
Gentlemen, ladies and gentlemen, I promised you a treat, and I don't think I've disappointed you. This has been one of the most mesmerising speeches and most informative speeches which I think we've ever had at the Swinton Circle. So I'd like to thank Michael from the bottom of my heart for such an enlightening and inspiring and encouraging talk. Because, as we all know, last Thursday, announced on Sunday, was probably the biggest defeat that our enemies, as Michael has told you, who the real enemy of the British nation has been, British nation and the British Commonwealth has been for the last 150 years, took a sound beating on Thursday. We are living in a different world today than we were even a week ago. There will be questions and answers until the buffet is served in about 20 minutes' time. And then after that, Michael will speak on Chatham House rules, which means no recording. So a few more questions after that. But before then, we have got our regular treat, which we have at most, if not all, Swinton Circle meetings. And that is a song by our resident minstrel, our treasurer, Mr. Robin Widow. Now let me put this song in context. I was asked earlier on this evening, what is the difference between the Swinton Circle and so many Eurosceptic patriotic groups? And I tell them the difference is that we are positive, we are optimistic. Alas, too many of the other groups are moaners and groaners, doom and gloom merchants who do not believe in Britain's future. We do. We believe that the future of Britain and the British Empire / Commonwealth, the greatest days, are still to come. And some of the things that we do might seem to some people peripheral, but I don't think they are peripheral. And one campaign which we have mounted this year after our AGM last year was to advocate a winter Commonwealth Games. We brought this up, and it's good to see Paul here from Canada. We had the lady who runs the freebie Canadian newspaper that you see on London. My mind has gone over for a moment, but her name will come back. She spoke for her, and that was I think exactly 4 years ago when I was saying this year is the Winter Olympic Games and the Commonwealth Games. Why can't we also have a Winter Commonwealth Games? And the Swinton Circle passed a motion last year to advocate this, and we have had some very encouraging responses, both from Commonwealth Games England and the Australian Commonwealth Games Association, who like the idea. But Commonwealth Games England said to us in their reply letter, if you have any more suggestions, etc., about what we can do through the Commonwealth Games England, let us know. And this brought us back to something which was brought up 2 or 3 years back, and that is the fact that there is no standardised English national anthem. Wales has the land of our fathers, as David will probably recite to us in a few minutes' time. Scotland now has Flower of Scotland, which, in spite of certain controversial lyrics, is still a good number for them. Northern Ireland has Danny Boy, Londonderriere. But England, and it's sickened me for ages, whenever an English national team plays, they only play God Save the Queen, which is a British this is that national anthem of all of us. And I think this is probably viewed by certain Scots as English arrogance, and might be one reason why the Yes campaign is gaining strength. So I wrote back to Commonwealth Games England, it was approved by our committee, and we are now going to advocate an English national anthem that should be adopted by referendum. There are already 2 names in the hat. Land of Hope and Glory, which of course was used by the Commonwealth Games up until 2006, and Jerusalem, which was used in 2010 and I think will be used again this year. But we as the Swinton Circle are going to throw a 3rd suggestion into the hat, and that is a song called Hearts of English oak, which was written and composed by our own treasurer and resident minstrel, Robin Willow, and now Robin is going to play Heart of English Oak.
Indeed. You'll find this on my website. If you look for Robin Willow, you'll get the website and you can hear this. It started out because I'd written a song, Por España está la ella, about Spanish soldiers, particularly the soldiers who went to the Americas with Cortés, and I got to perform that live on the radio at the time in 1988 when we were celebrating the defeat of the Spanish Armada. And I thought it was remiss of me to have a song about the Spanish soldiers for Spain and her alone, Por España está la ella, and not to write a song about the English soldiers. So this is Heart of English Oak, which is about an English soldier, an archer. I have always kept my promises, my word is always true. So I have to fight for England, but I will return to you. Sheep are sold at market. Sorry, it's out of tune. My promises, my word is always true. So I have to fight for England, but I will return to you. My sheep are sold at market, the harvesting is done. A pint of ale before us, and the pleasant autumn sun. I have always kept my promises, my word is always true. So I have to fight for England, but I will return to you. My arrows are made of ash, my longbow is of yew. The light of battle in my eyes, and my aim is true. I have always kept my promises, my word is always true. So I have to fight for England, but I will return to you. The tide is flowing for us, the mainsail must be set. The dragon's fire is in our hearts, we'll win this battle yet. I have always kept my promises, my word is always true. So I have to fight for England, but I will return to you. Again we'll win this battle, recover what was lost. The ship returns to harbour, which on stormy seas was tossed. I have always kept my promises, my word is always true. So I have to fight for England, but I will return to you. I have always kept my promises, my word is always true. So I have to fight for England, but I will return to you.
Absolutely brilliant, and if it ever does come to a vote, and Hearts of English Oak is a alternative, I hope that will always get your votes. I know that Dave will not be voting because he will vote for Land of Our Fathers regardless, which is a bloody good song, let's face it. Not as good as yours, Robin. we've been inspired by what Michael has had to say. I know that John, what's happened to John, who is a great ripperologist, is going to be particularly keen to have a word with you about what's happened. I can remember quite a few things, and particularly what you said about the 1975 referendum. Because I remember that, I know I don't look older, but I remember that referendum, and I remember at the time all the press said that the vote was going to go yes, but everybody I met in my work environment, in my social environment, in my sporting environment, even in my parents' church environment, there were very few people who were going to vote yes, in spite of the opinion polls. And I couldn't make it out when that vote came out that it went 2-1. And as Michael, that I actually analysed this at the time, and I know I might sound like I'm boasting. Okay, I am boasting, but my analysis was exactly as Michael said. It was because the counts were made centrally, and I've been through referenda in South Africa as well, and I can tell you it is far easier to rig votes when there are big constituencies, when votes come in from all around.
Yes.
It's far easier to rig them than for local council seats or even for constituency seats for MPs. That vote was rigged. I said that in 75, and Michael has confirmed that with more things out. Anyway, you've heard enough of me. You don't want to hear me. You want to raise your questions to our brilliant guest speaker tonight, a man who we are really honoured and privileged to hear. So, although we were going to stop at when the Buffy's next come in, we will resume. I saw the gentleman in the front there first, and then I saw Jerry.
Thank you. The Telegraph newspaper yesterday and today was front page about success of a party. The Evening Standard today is front page about a hideous trial of a man called Ralph Harris.
Yeah.
What's the Evening Standard doing?
I suspect that the media will try and deflect attention away from the problems being experienced by Clegg, by Cameron, and by Miliband, particularly Miliband and Clegg. So I think it's a distraction strategy. But the problems with the Harris prosecution, as I said earlier, the Harris prosecution is part of a series of prosecutions which are a distraction strategy to deflect attention away from the Savile paedophile ring. The problem with Savile is that the Prime Minister, Edward Heath, and the Cabinet Secretary, John Hunt, were both paedophiles, and they were supplied with young boys by Savile.
Thank you. A different question, please.
Sorry, it is a different question. Can we have Jerry next, and then we come back to you?
Thank you.
Just a quick one. I was interested in your early comments. I've been in the reserve forces for some years, and at a mess dinner, one of my opposite numbers was saying that the Blair's child that was born when they were in Downing Street was not Tony's.
Leo.
Leo, yeah, because he'd done the snip on Tony.
I couldn't possibly comment.
but it definitely wasn't your baby.
I am being recorded. I was very careful to use the expression a Labour politician. He was a Labour politician who was a leading figure in the Blair government.
May I just comment that the real father wasn't mine either, wasn't me either. God, I can do better than her. The gentleman in the front.
I couldn't possibly comment.
Yeah, the gentleman in the front.
Thank you. Front page of the Telegraph yesterday, or possibly the day before, was a little snippet of the Mayor of London. And it said in the little snippet Peasants Revolt.
Yes.
When I looked in the inside of the newspaper, big banner headline, Peasants Revolt. What gives that shit the right to call the people of England peasants?
Well, that's a fair question.
We're plebs.
I think
No, we're plebs, not peasants.
I think the gentleman actually meant done then.
Boris Johnson is missing the point. The point is that the EU is finished and we need to get the hell out of it. We shouldn't have gone into it. We should have got out a long time ago. We need to leave. The only way out in the next few years is for UKIP and the Tory party to form a pact. Not everybody in UKIP will be happy, not everybody in the Tory party will be happy, but the electoral arithmetic is this. Either we have a UKIP Tory pact, or we have a Labour government or a Labour Lib Dem coalition. And that means 5 more years, possibly 10, of EU membership. So the way to come out, and come out quickly, is for the Tory party to offload Cameron, for us to do a deal with UKIP that involves outright withdrawal from the European Union, giving 12 months' notice so there are no legal complications under the Vienna Convention on the Law of Treaties, immediate repeal of the European Communities Act, with a very generous allocation to UKIP of seats and members of the cabinet, and it needs to be, I think, more seats than UKIP are expecting to win in 2015 if the government goes that far. Remember, if there's a vote of confidence and the coalition collapses, then there'll be a general election straight away. We could have a general election as early as the end of July, and we could immediately denounce the European Treaty on 12 months' notice, and we could have the European Communities Act repealed by the end of July if we get our act together. It's a no-brainer.
Yeah. I saw John Bell, and then I saw Robin Willow. So John Bell. Yeah.
With Philip Allen in the Cabinet Office,
Yeah.
how did the Germans miss D-Day and the massive deception that
They
surrounded
didn't.
it?
They didn't. I'm actually going to D-Day for the celebrations next week. I'm an accredited correspondent, or at least I'm expecting to be. I'm commenting for my website on www.veteranstoday.com, if we'll give the advertisement. As I've explained in Spyhunter, the Germans knew we were coming on D-Day. Eisenhower, I remember, was working for the Germans. Eisenhower had sent one of his staff officers, a colonel, down to Algeciras by Jib for discussions with the Jerrys. The Jerrys knew we were coming. That's why Rommel wasn't in Normandy on D-Day. The D-Day date was set by Rommel, not Eisenhower. It was set to give Rommel a good excuse not to be in Normandy. The deal was that Rommel was giving us France, and we were giving Rommel Germany. Rommel was Canaris's candidate to be president of Germany in succession to Adolf Hitler. The strategy was to murder Hitler, which, as we know, they tried, and to install Rommel. Canaris obviously would be controlling Rommel, and the Germans realized they couldn't hang on to France. Now, in practice, the Jerrys would have hung on to France by intelligence means. Canaris never intended to give up control of France. He always understood that he could probably get control of France using assets like Jean Monnet and Robert Schuman. And in fact, that happened. De Gaulle was working with the Germans. De Gaulle was installed in a deal with Canaris in '58. The Fifth Republic is basically Vichyist. Vichyist intelligence officers came back in and took control of French intelligence. De Gaulle was aware that the D-Day date was a phony, but he was willing to go along with the deal. Now, the deal collapsed because Canaris failed to have Hitler assassinated. Himmler spotted the assassination attempt, and Himmler's man in the bunker moved the bomb. The German asset, the German intelligence officer, Count von Schlieffen, who placed the bomb, knew what he was doing. What people forget, and what historians have overlooked, is that the device was moved, and was moved by Himmler's man in the bunker. And Himmler wanted Hitler shaken up and injured so that he would authorize a crackdown on the Abwehr. At that point, the war was back on, and we realized that we were going to have to go all the way into Germany. But that's the truth about D-Day. The Jerrys knew we were coming, they knew where we were coming, they knew the date. In fact, they not only knew the date, they'd actually selected the date. The whole thing was a phony. The Panzers were kept back on Canaris's orders, not Hitler's, and Jodl, who were reporting to Canaris, slipped Hitler a Mickey Finn. In fairness to Adolf Hitler, he did not sleep in on the morning of D-Day. He had been slipped a Mickey Finn by Jodl the night before.
So the only one who didn't know was Hitler.
The only one involved, the only two, Hitler didn't know, Churchill didn't know, the King didn't know, and Montgomery almost certainly didn't know either, although Montgomery was a fairly senior Freemason. I think Montgomery suspected it. He didn't know at the time, I'm sure. So Hitler did not know, Churchill did not know. It was a carve-up between Eisenhower, Canaris and Rommel. I have to say that the plans for D-Day were a bit daft, frankly. And had Rommel been in charge, and had Rommel had the Panzers, which he would have had, but for Jodl knocking out Hitler, sorry, no, not giving Hitler a Mickey Finn, had Rommel got the Panzers, it might have been a bit tricky getting ashore. There was intelligence interference on the D-Day operation. There was the Slapton Sands incident, which was involved German spies on Eisenhower's staff betraying an American exercise in Devon. The Americans were landed at the wrong beach quite deliberately, again Eisenhower's people. They were landed literally at the wrong beach. Paratroops were dropped into the sea, again deliberately. There was quite a lot of interference. It's a bit of a miracle that we actually got ashore and won, given the level of German intelligence penetration with Eisenhower's staff and also with the cabinet office.
The buffet snacks are now being brought out. I don't know if there's going to be any more, so we'll have one last question, because I did see Robin's hand go up, and then after Robin we will adjourn for buffet and then come back in about half an hour afterwards. So Robin Willow.
I'd like your comments to establish something, to clarify something.
Yeah,
A lot of the ideas that you put forward, the information you've given us, involves conspiracy.
yes.
Now, it is very common for the allegation of conspiracy theorists to be put forward to discourage people from presenting an idea or the information, the story of a conspiracy. Do conspiracies there actually happen?
Yes.
Can you give us some dialogue to demonstrate that conspiracies really do happen?
Yes. Well, the classic is the Kennedy. As I've devoted much of the preface to dealing with the argument this is a conspiracy theory. And actually in the book I've punctured a number of conspiracy theories. I'm not a conspiracy theorist, I'm an intelligence specialist. And I've punctured a number of conspiracy theories about Sikorsky, for example, and Churchill. That was an accident. And there was a big conspiracy theory about the shoot down of Hammarskjöld. And I've explained exactly how the DC-6 crashed. So I've actually punctured a number of conspiracy theories. As I've said in the book, what matters is what happened. Conspiracies happen. Conspiracies are organised by intelligence agencies. The issue is what happened, not is it a conspiracy or not. Was there intelligence involvement? In the case of the Kennedy assassination, there clearly was. I've explained in the book that John McCone was a brilliant intelligence officer who'd exposed a German asset called Forrestal in the 1940s, worked for the Office of Naval Intelligence in World War II. Kennedy knew what he was doing when McCone was appointed. Alan Dulles worked for the Germans. The Germans wanted to get back in control of CIA, and the Germans set up the assassination of Kennedy. The operational planning was done by Richard Helms, who was another German agent. The person in overall charge was Otto Skorzeny, who